Does clearances for artwork in my film cost more money? Does having more artwork in my film mean that I'm gonna have to spend more money? What is considered artwork in a film? If you are asking those questions, I've got some answers for you. My name is Sarah Kogan. I'm a designer and visual producer for film and television. I champion filmmakers by helping them craft cinematic cohesion, and I love talking about all things design related, and especially design and budget related. So in this one, we're going to talk about some of the stuff around art and clearances and what does it all mean. When you are doing any sort of show out in the world, you get to have clearances on the artwork. And what that means is that the people who have created the artwork give you the approval to use their artwork in your project. When we are doing it for our films, artwork can be anything from paintings and pictures on the walls, photos. It can be signage, logos, brochures, newspapers. The artwork is, what's on your pizza box that you're using for your film. It's any of the schematics or like technical drawings that you might be shooting. It's the signage for, some 1800s shop, right? It's not just contemporary based, it can also be period based. All of that is artwork, and all of that is a part of what gets to be cleared and figured out when we're doing what we're doing. Getting clearances also means like graphic t-shirts. It can mean the prints on designer wallpaper or the prints of designer clothing. If they have a very unique, specific print that is theirs, you have to get the right to use it and clearance before you actually put it in your film. All of those are ways to do that. On major films and major studios, they have a clearance department that's part of legal that makes sure that everything is taken care of, that the contracts and agreements are signed appropriately, and that everything is copacetic in that way. So if you're doing it on your own for your indie film, you're going to want to consult an attorney, because again, this is all going back to intellectual property and who owns the rights to what. There are a lot of also great resources out there that you can pull from and pay a subscription fee for, or purchase the licenses for use of that image in your project. You've got to be careful of the kind of subscription that you're doing. That's going to cost money to get the licensing for any sort of artwork off of a site like Shutterstock, Big Stock, Unsplash. Like, there's a lot of wonderful subscription and purchase platforms for getting your images. You want to make sure that you're really clear about the licensing agreement that you're actually purchasing to know what you can do. There are different licenses through all these different sites that allow you to either use that image solely for the purpose of print and editorial. Then there is the use of images in film and television, which can cost more money. So we get to be really clear about what is the agreement that we've made with the artist for their work in terms of the use of our stuff. And now if you're doing an individual artist's work, you can just ask them directly for the rights to use in your film, and they may ask you for a licensing fee. You might end up spending more money in that way as well on graphics and images for your film. It's one of those places where prices and the cost of things can definitely go up exponentially. We get to be mindful of what that costs, right? And then if you have a fictitious company in your show, or you want to make custom graphic tees, or you want to make business cards, newspapers, any sort of branding at like all the food little things at a fast food restaurant, or a menu, any sort of imagery like that are all graphics. Even the packaging on products, those are graphics. If you're doing it at that level, and especially if you have a really specific aesthetic for your film or show, you're going to need to hire in a graphics designer to be there with you the entire production to give you all of those images and the artwork that you need in the scale and scope required for either the sign printing shop, the actual like paper printers. They do this process called direct to garment printing. So you have to have a specific kind of file at a specific pixel quality for them. Your graphic artists and the people who in your team that understand graphics will be able to provide that for you. And that's an added cost. And if you're not hiring somebody to do it because you feel like you don't have the resources for that, you're then going to be collapsing that position into somebody else's position, which means other things on your film aren't going to get done. Graphics can take a very long time in terms of the proportion of what seems done and what's not. There's a lead time that graphics require as well. Typically there's a design conversation of what it wants to look like. Then there's the creation, right? There's here are the options for approval. Where do we think we are with this? Do these need to be tweaked? Bringing it back for final approval, and then sending it to the printer, the embroiderer, the sign maker, all the people who then, the actual businesses that are out in the world that then make those items for us. That is something to take in consideration, because if we are doing something last minute, we're going to spend a lot more money in rush fees. This is why it's so important to be really clear about what you want with your graphics sooner versus later, because you'll save money in that way, right? We don't have to pay the rush fees, so therefore we save a nice chunk of change, right? We like that. This is the benefit of being prepared, of going through the work earlier instead of waiting until later down the process. Pushing things down the line never serves us. How you go about your graphics is completely up to you and the needs of your film, the way that you're going to do that, the budget you have for the labor, all of that is completely up to the parameters of your project. The thing you want to be really aware of when going about doing your graphics is to make sure, and even coming up with, fictitious companies and things for your film, you want to make sure that you're far enough away from other brands and companies that there won't be any sort of intellectual property infringement or conflicts of interest, right? It's really important that we're clear on that, because that can end up giving us a lawsuit that, we don't want, because that's then more money we're spending on something because we didn't do our due diligence. On a major show, you take a photo of what it is that's the image and the graphic. I like to title the page with the show so it's very clear in case they send it to a brand. And then you get to actually put the scene and how it's being utilized on that, or who it's being utilized on, so that if there's any concerns that the brand might have or the artist might have, the clearance department can say this is exactly how it's going to be used. Because most brands want to know, how are you going to be using our product if we're going to give you clearance. Some brands are not okay with you using blood with their products, and that's definitely a thing with product placement. Some other companies are not okay with you associating their clothes with a specific kind of community because they're trying to distance themselves from those communities. So we get to be aware of what that requirement is, and that's all a part of the usage of people's artwork and the usage of people's products in those agreements that we're making. We want to make sure that we are playing by the books. So make sure you have an attorney on board that you can talk to about this if you are choosing to do this on your own. If you have to hire an attorney, that's also an additional cost. And if you're not an attorney, I'd be very mindful of reading the agreements, because again, you can get yourself in some tricky water. So just make sure you know what to look for in the contracts and what to look for in the agreements to make sure you're good to go. Because nobody wants to be sued, because that affects our budgets. If you found this helpful and interesting and insightful, then I'd love to share my book with you, The Filmmaker's Guide to Budgeting for Costumes, Hair, Makeup, and Production Design. You can find more about this book at sarahkogan.com/book. I am really excited to share it with you. It's all about the ways to think about budgeting, what factors actually affect your budget, how to plan out those things to know how to maximize your resources. The reason to know about our budgets and get really clear on the factors is it allows us to make the priorities within our budget of where the money should go. From a place of, this is what matters in my film. This is what I like to call the storytelling language we are using to make this film happen. And because of that, because I know what that creative vision is, I can then go and create the film that I'm truly dreaming of and visioning with the resources that I have, instead of laying out a blanket budget, not knowing what that is going to actually give us, and then realizing that we put money in one department that maybe would have been better served in another. So we can only know that when we know what we want in our films, what matters the most, and how to think about what things cost. Because when we know what things cost and we understand how to think of them, we can make the decisions to really support our budget and our creative vision. Again, please check out my book, The Filmmaker's Guide to Budgeting for Costumes, Hair, Makeup, and Production Design. I'm excited to hear what you think about it. The link for my book is right below in those show notes, right there. And if you found this helpful, subscribe to my channel. I'm making more and more videos like this every day.